Gravity Falls is full of some of the weirdest and coolest characters out of any cartoon. The Pines twins have gone on to become one of the most iconic duos in animation. Everybody loves Grunkle Stan and his brother Ford, and over the years, Bill Cipher has gone on to become one of those characters with a really loyal cult following. Sometimes a little too loyal. I think some people forget this guy was the villain. But with a show as amazing as Gravity Falls, it's really no surprise that it's filled with top tier characters. I mean, even the side characters were really well liked. Soos and Gideon were probably two of my favorite characters to have on screen. But even though Gravity Falls was filled with so many fantastic characters, I've always had the feeling that there was one character that just wasn't done right. A character that never really got their own time to shine, even though at times they were arguably one of the best in the series. And that character was none other than Wendy Corduroy. Wendy is technically a part of the main cast of characters. She was the neighborhood cool girl, Dipper's crush, and a character that I found to be really interesting at times. But despite all that, when you compare Wendy to the other 5 characters in the Mystery Shack, she's arguably the worst. Now look, before y'all go crazy on me in the comments, I'm not saying Wendy's a bad character by any means. She's actually one of my personal favorites in the show. But when you compare her to the rest of the main cast, she gets the least amount of development and the least amount of time to shine as her own character, which is so crazy to me because Wendy always felt like a character that the writers just wanted to do more with but never actually executed. So I wanted to dive deeper into this and analyze not only why I think Wendy was fumbled as a character, but also why I think she had potential to be so much more. Like most of the characters in the main cast, Wendy made her first appearance in the very first episode of Gravity Falls. Now because the episode wasn't centered around her, she didn't get that much screen time. But from the few scenes she did have, we would get some type of insight into what type of character she was.
Wendy, I need to borrow the golf cart so I can save my sister from a zombie!
Try not to hit any pedestrians.
Okay, so it was really just one scene, but even though she literally had 5 seconds of screen time in the first episode, surprisingly enough, this was actually a pretty good setup for Wendy's character. In that small glimpse, the audience got the idea that Wendy was that cool, laid-back teenage girl working at the Mystery Shack, and even though we hadn't seen much of her, it kind of made you a little bit interested in her character, wanting to know more about her. Unfortunately though, for the next couple episodes, Wendy was a certified background character, either not being in an episode or just having really irrelevant moments. I mean, come on man, does anyone really care about how many guys Wendy broke up with?
You've broken up with guys, right?
Oh yeah. Russ Durham, Eli Hall, Stoney Davidson.
Fun fact, there were actually supposed to be some girl names up in there, but the big mouse told Alex Hirsch no can do. But even though Wendy was getting the background treatment, it would actually be episode 5, The Inconveniencing, that would really put her personality on display. The episode starts off with Stan leaving out, asking Wendy and Soos if they're gonna clean the bathrooms. Soos tells them of course they will, and Wendy tells them absolutely not. Wendy then shows Dipper and Mabel a ladder to the Mystery Shack roof, and then takes them to her secret hiding spot. The 3 then mess around throwing pine cones off the top of the Mystery Shack, and then Wendy's friends pull up to pick her up. Wendy then asks the 2 if they're gonna rat on her to Stan if she leaves with her friends, and then Dipper does a gesture indicating that he won't tell anyone. This is also the episode where the writers make it painfully obvious that Dipper has a crush on Wendy. But in all honesty, I can't really blame them because they made Wendy extra cool this episode for no reason. I swear, watching that scene as a kid where she hopped off the roof jumping from tree to tree, I swear I fell in love. But fast forward in the episode, and the next time Wendy's friends come to pick her up, Dipper suggests that him and Mabel come along, and Wendy, believing that the 2 of them are both 13, okays it. The group then heads to an abandoned convenience store where the owner supposedly died, and Dipper, using his best attempts to try to impress Wendy, actually breaks the gang in. The gang then parties all night, causing all type of mayhem all over the convenience store. But everything turns to a disaster when the gang comes across chalk outlines of the dead bodies of the owners of the convenience store. Dipper, who's still trying to impress Wendy and doesn't want to seem like a little kid in front of her, agrees to lay down in the chalk outline after being dared by one of Wendy's friends. But after Dipper does this, he ends up summoning the ghosts of the store owners, and they are not happy as they begin to cause havoc on the group, possessing Mabel, putting Thompson in a video game, turning one of Wendy's friends into a hot dog, which I'm not gonna lie, I thought this was hilarious as a kid. Eventually it gets to the point where Dipper confronts the ghosts, and he learns that the reason they're tormenting the group is because they hate teenagers, because teenagers were the reason they died in their previous life, which I'm not gonna gonna lie, is a crazy explanation. Dipper reveals to them that he's actually not a teenager and he's only 12, and they grant him the right to leave. But then Dipper asks if there's anything that he can do to get them to let Wendy and her friends go, and they tell him the only way he'll be able to do that is if he performs some kind of dance, to which Dipper then performs the Lammy Lammy dance. And I think all Gravity Falls fans could admit this was an iconic moment. The ghosts then end up setting everybody free, and when Wendy's friends ask Wendy how they were able to get rid of the ghosts, she gets ready to tell everybody how Dipper had to do the Lammy Lammy dance, but noticing that Dipper was gonna be really embarrassed about it, she makes up a lie about how Dipper grabbed the bat and just fought off all the ghosts, making them seem cool to all of her friends. Now this is not only one of my favorite Gravity Falls episodes, but one of my favorite Wendy episodes because it really gave some good insight into who Wendy is as a character. Because yes, Wendy is the neighborhood cool girl that we thought she was. She parties, breaks the rules, and likes to have fun. But in this episode, we also see that she's a caring person. She sticks up for her friends and doesn't just throw them under the bus for a good laugh. And I really like this side of Wendy that they showed. So after watching this episode, I was really looking forward to see what they were gonna do with her character moving forward. Unfortunately though, not much really came out of her character after this. Episode 5 gave us a good look into Wendy as a character, but like I said before, it was also the same episode that really introduced the plot point of Dipper having a crush on Wendy. And look, on the surface, that's not a bad thing. I mean, we all love romantic storylines, right? Some of the most interesting storylines come from characters having interest in one another, even if it's one-sided. So Dipper having a crush on Wendy isn't necessarily a bad thing, and we did get some really cool episodes revolving around this idea. But if there was 1, 2, maybe 3 episodes revolving around this concept, maybe that would have been fine. But the problem began when almost every time Wendy was in an episode, it was only to further this storyline of Dipper having a crush on her. Almost every time Wendy was in an episode, she was either talking to Dipper or being shown from the perspective of Dipper. In Double Dipper, the episode revolves around Dipper trying to hang out with Wendy at the Mystery Shack dance. But because Dipper's a borderline psychopath, he ends up making a bunch of clones of himself to craft this perfect plan on how to get Wendy to dance with him, only for him to later realize that all he had to do was talk to Wendy like a normal person for him to have a cool interaction with her. And look, don't get me wrong, I like this moment. This is one of my favorite interactions in Gravity Falls. But I feel like after this episode, we should have really started expanding on Wendy more as a character. Because in The Time Traveler's Pig, Wendy was in a good majority of this episode. Only problem is, we didn't learn anything about her. The episode revolves around Dipper going back in time over and over again to prevent himself from hitting Wendy in the eye with a baseball, while simultaneously winning her a carnival prize and keeping her from dating Robbie. Side note, but I always wondered, why did Dipper go back in time so many times to do this elaborate way of throwing the baseball? If he was just going to keep redoing it over and over again, why didn't he just teach himself how to throw a baseball? I promise you, if he would have did that, he would have cut this episode down to 5 minutes. But yeah, back to Wendy. Nothing really happened with her this episode outside of her getting a black eye over and over again and her dating Robbie, which, you know, everybody hates Robbie. All my homies hate Robbie. Then in episodes like Fight Fighters, even though Wendy is a central motivation for the characters and what they do in the episodes, she's in a fraction of the episode. The episode revolves around Robbie challenging Dipper to a fight, and this whole altercation starts and stemmed from the fact that both of them had feelings for Wendy. And look, don't get me wrong, I like the episode, and it does make sense that it would follow Robbie and Dipper more than any other character in the episode. But it's like, come on, man, it's almost comical how little Wendy's in this episode. Wendy is literally in the opening scene at the arcade with Robbie and Dipper, and then after that she doesn't come back until the last 2 minutes of the episode, and I'm not exaggerating, literally the last 2 minutes. And the thing that's so weird to me is that the episode sets up in the beginning that Wendy's not going to be in it by her saying that she's going camping with her dad, but I'm just wondering, like, why couldn't that have been a B story? To me, that would have flowed so much better. You could have had the Robbie and Dipper fight story as the A plot driving the episode, and then you could have taken us from Wendy's point of view as she goes camping with her family, and we could have learned more about her and how she deals with her family and things like that. And it would have flowed really well because the episode would have started with these 3 characters and it would have ended with these 3 characters meeting back up again. But instead of that, we got a B plot about Mabel trying to get Grunkle Stan over his fear of heights, which, you know, isn't terrible, but like, come on, man, can Wendy get anything? And honestly, this was all Wendy was regulated to throughout the course of season 1, and it really seemed like she was never going to be more than anything than a love interest for Dipper and never really have her character expanded. But in the season 2 episode Into the Bunker, that almost seemed like it wasn't going to be the case. Almost. Because most infamously, this was the episode where Dipper actually confessed to Wendy, and obviously because Wendy's way older than Dipper, she had to reject them. Side note, but did anyone who watched this show while it was airing think Wendy was way older than what she actually was? Like the way they were framing the age gap in the show, I thought Wendy was like 17, 18. I didn't realize she was like 2 or 3 years older than Dipper. Like, don't get me wrong, still too old to be dating a 12-year-old, but I swear I thought she was like older than what she actually was. I don't know why they picked one of the lowest teenagers to portray this, but I actually did really like this scene where Wendy had to let Dipper down easy because number one, it was very mature and very realistic for a teen. I hate when they try to dumb kids down in shows and make them act like they can't act mature in certain situations. But also, like I said before, it goes to show that Wendy really cares for Dipper as a friend, and she goes the extra mile to not only make him feel better, but also to let him know the reason why it couldn't happen rather than just rejecting him. And as much as I didn't like some of the Wendy Dipper episodes, this was a moment that I actually found pretty satisfying, and it made me excited to see how both characters would move going forward. And obviously, if you've seen Gravity Falls, you know the development that Dipper got. But as for Wendy, nothing really changed. The Wendy we got at the end of Into the Bunker was literally the same Wendy we got for the rest of season 2, because once there were no more Dipper and Wendy episodes, Wendy really took a backseat to the story. She was either a background character, a side character to somebody else's plot, or just not even in an episode, which is really frustrating because when you watch the Into the Bunker episode, it really felt like the writers were about to pull the trigger on her. We saw a side of Wendy that was more brave, more adventurous, and more invested, and it really felt like the writers were about to bump her up a notch. And what's even worse is Wendy never even got a solo episode.
I remember I thought it was really sweet the way that Wendy
protects Dipper.
Yeah, she knows the social stakes, she gets it. And it's an unspoken thing.
Yeah.
Like up until this point, you know, like she's been chill with him, they've been getting along, but there's been this feeling that like he's on the outside and he's not really her friend yet. And the moment she's willing to just say this about him without him even asking for it, like suddenly the friendship is real.
Yeah.
It's a really important moment.
Well, because it was super important to us, because it's like, you know, we've all seen, and things have gotten better since we were making this, but we've all seen stories about like love interests that are just there to be a love interest and they're not a character.
Right.
And we were like just fighting as hard as we could to make Wendy like a real viable character that could have stories on her own and stuff. And it was like moments like that where she stood up for Dipper when she didn't have to.
Where you start to get to know her. But I will say that we always wanted to do a full Wendy episode, and we never cracked one because I feel like part of it was this character that we've created here is so chill and likable that when you put her in a situation where you have to make her commit the sin where she has to learn 21 minutes of story, it was like, oh, it doesn't feel like that awesome Wendy we know. And I know there's a way we could have done it, but we never quite.
There were like 5 dead
solved
episodes.
it.
It was tough.
Yeah, we tried many times and could never quite land it.
I mean,
we wanted to honor her so much that we couldn't figure out the right episode with her because we didn't want to mess her up.
And look, I get what they're saying about not wanting to mess up Wendy's character and things feeling off, because yes, a lot of things that we liked about Wendy was that she was the cool person. She didn't really care about that much. She was really laid back. But let's be real, Wendy isn't just this laid back chill character 24/7. We've seen countless moments throughout the show where Wendy has normal human reactions to the things going on around her. Like, that's one of the things that I like so much about Alex Hirsch's characters. No matter how cartoonish things could have got, he always wrote his characters pretty realistic. They never felt unrelatable or too cartoonish or too tropey. They always felt like real people. So even though people loved how cool of a character Wendy was, I think people would have loved to see another side of her. Because while I loved a lot of the cool Wendy moments, some of my favorite moments from her were her just having genuine conversations with the characters around her. As much flack as some people give a lot of the Dipper and Wendy episodes, those episodes gave a lot of moments where you got to see how genuine of a person Wendy was. And I think having at least one episode revolving around Wendy really could have highlighted that. And I really think if Wendy would have got a standalone episode or a standalone plot, it would have made people love her even more. For example, and look, don't go at me crazy in the comments, I was not the biggest fan of Soos for the longest time. I know, how could I not like Soos? He's a beloved character. Look, I get it. Look, I didn't hate Soos. I did not hate him at all. But I'm just honestly not an overly optimistic, outroverted guy, so I don't really resonate with characters like Soos at first glance. So he was a character that I didn't really hate, but I just didn't really have any feelings towards. But when the writers started giving us character development with Soos and we saw his backstory, we saw everything he went through with his missing dad, how he was raised by his grandma, and how Grunkle Stan was like the father figure Soos never had. It made me look at Soos in an entirely different light. And when the finale came around and Grunkle Stan gave the mystery shack over to Soos and he told Soos that he was Mr. Mystery now, I'm telling y'all, I almost shed a tear. And this was for a character that I literally said I had no feelings towards in the beginning of the series. And I just really wish Wendy would have got some memorable episode or memorable plot point like this. And what's even crazier is Alex Hirsch is such a genius. He had amazing plots for Wendy that really could have worked.
Like this sort of simpler one, we had a B story that I absolutely loved, where Wendy has basically been taken to task by her dad for always getting into trouble. You know, her dad's this big manly lumberjack, and he's like, you know, like you keep getting into trouble, you keep breaking into places and hanging out with these hoodlums. You're grounded, and she's ticked off. So while she's ticked off, she shoplifts some stuff from the mystery shack. And Grunkle Stan has surveillance, and he catches Wendy shoplifting, and he calls her into his office and he's like, Wendy, we gotta talk. I saw you stealing chocolate Mars and snow globes from the shack. And she's like, oh, I'm so sorry, Mr. Pines. I know I'm in trouble. You're gonna fire me. He's like, no, you've got a gift. You're the best thief I've ever seen. You and me, I've been waiting my whole life to discover someone who's as good a pickpocket as I am. Don't you realize we could go out there, we could knock down a bank or something. We're gonna do this big time. And she's like, really? He's like, you're not ready yet. So, you know, we go into basically a training montage of Grunkle Stan training Wendy how to be like a small-time crook, and they're, you know, knocking over, like, you know, the hot dog on a stick at the mall and stuff. And finally she's getting good at it. And she's like, Stan, this stuff is small time, okay? We are going to steal the diamond from the Gravity Falls History Museum. Think about that. We can split the pieces, wear it around our necks, we look like ballers. You're starting to scare me a little bit, Wendy. Even I've never stolen a diamond. Are you crazy? She's like, yeah, I'm crazy. You love me. He's like, I do. Let's steal a diamond. So Wendy and Stan try to steal this diamond, and of course they get caught. And Wendy in particular, Stan screws up. He's too old. He throws out his back. Wendy, you gotta steal it for me. She is able to get through all the layers of security. She's able to knock out Blood to Derlin. She gets the diamond. She's got it. And then, you know, another security guy grabs her, says, this is Corduroy, come with me. They throw her into the Gravity Falls jail. They say, we're gonna call your dad. And she's like, no, my dad, he can't find out about this. And Grunkle Stan shows up and he's like, hey guys, cops, I actually want to tell you, this girl, she was working for me the whole time. This wasn't her idea. I'm the mastermind. It was my idea to steal the diamond. Take me away. She wishes she could be a master thief like me. They're like, okay, they let her go. They throw him in jail. Wendy's like, why did you do that for me? You're going to have to be here for like days. And he says basically that he realized, like, you know, like, look, I'm old. Like, I already had a life. You know, like, you can still make a choice to not be an idiot like me. Like, okay, you got quick fingers. Use it to play an instrument or something. Stop stealing or else you're gonna get trapped here. Get out of here. And so basically it's like Wendy and Stan bonding, essentially, you know what I mean? And Wendy discovering she has a talent, and that maybe even though her dad is annoying, telling her not to get in trouble, then like maybe she can use that same energy for something better.
Like, honestly, you can't tell me that this wouldn't have been an amazing episode. If you go to the comments on that animation, they have people saying that this is my favorite Gravity Falls episode, and this isn't even a canon episode or plot point. But it just sucks knowing that there were things like this that could have happened in the actual show, but ended up getting scrapped for whatever reasons. You know, throughout my time online and hearing different conversations between different fandoms, I've heard people say that Wendy suffers from Millie syndrome. Now, if you've seen Hazbin Hotel or Hell of a Boss, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But if you haven't seen either one of those shows, Millie syndrome is basically a female character that genuinely has no purpose. She has no other purpose other than to drive the narrative of the person she's attached to. In the case of Hell of a Boss, this concept revolves around the character Millie, who is genuinely seen as having no personality outside of being the wife of her husband Moxie, and who only recently got one episode to flesh out her character a little bit more. And in the case of the show Hazbin Hotel, this is often how people view the character Vaggie, who quite literally has no other purpose than to be the servant and girlfriend of the character Charlie. Which is funny because I literally made a video about that not too long ago, which was actually the inspiration for this video. But even though I said that video was the inspiration for this Wendy video, I don't actually agree with the idea that Wendy has Millie syndrome. Is Wendy a character that many people believe wasn't used to the best of her abilities? Absolutely. Could we have gotten some really cool storylines with Wendy taking more of a leading role? Absolutely. But when I think of these two characters that people say have Millie syndrome, I think of them as an extension of the character that they're tied to. But for Wendy, I don't feel that way. Part of the reason why I can say I wanted a standalone Wendy episode is because I saw the personality. I saw a character that could stand out on their own. We saw the adventurous party girl. We saw the laid-back slacker. We saw the girl who grew up as a lumberjack and could handle fighting monsters. And we saw the caring and genuine person that went out her way to make her friends feel okay. Wendy has a personality. She is her own character. And even if she wasn't fleshed out to what she could have been, she's still an amazing character and a beloved one by many Gravity Falls fans. So I do think it's a disservice to her character just to say that she's another female character suffering from Millie syndrome. And while it's disappointing that we never got a standalone Wendy episode, hey, if Gravity Falls ever comes back for a season 3, maybe we might just get that episode. Or if not, my little headcanon is always going to be that plot with her and Stan stealing the diamond, I'm always going to believe that it's a canon episode. But let me know how you feel about Wendy in the comments. Do you think they could have did more with her, or do you think they did just enough at what they could have? Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to be notified when I upload my next video. Follow my socials in the descriptions if you want to keep up with me as I talk about everything animated. And until then, it's been your boy Corn XV, and I'm off this.
Pull up in Rovers, it's over. Bitch, I